We are going to make moral judgments on a person's character and actions. Is it not grossly offensive that New York and New Jersey have erected statues to Floyd, a violent criminal who served long prison sentences and who broke into a pregnant woman's home?
What?
Put a gun to her belly.
He did what? He did what? Oh my gosh, did he really do that?
Hi, I'm Rafe Hadel-Manku. In the debate you're about to see, I go head-to-head with Iman Aiton of Black Lives Matter. As many of you will know, this is not the first time that we've crossed swords, and some of those exchanges have been rather fiery, to put it mildly. On this occasion, we debated whether the statue of the Bristol philanthropist Edward Colston, who has links to slavery, should be put into a museum or, in my opinion, it should be re-erected where it once stood before being toppled by a baying mob no different to the Taliban or ISIS. The Black Lives...
This is going to be a very interesting video for me because honestly, I'm very new to these type of topics. Although I am a college student, I didn't go down this route of college. I didn't go down the historian route or the philosophical route. I chose the STEM route. So I may know a lot about STEM, but when it comes to this, I'm still learning. However, I do have a very objective point of view, so let's go into it.
The Lives Matter movement, now exposed for its corrupt and fraudulent use of millions of dollars of donations, bears much in common with the Taliban and ISIS, as I explain in this debate. They are all year zero cultures. But it's worth noting on another point that for all the talk of the value of black lives, BLM say nothing about the black lives suffering and lost to modern-day slavery in Africa. And they say nothing either about the black lives lost at the hands of other black people in the USA and in the UK too. In London, for example, despite comprising just 13% of the population, almost half of all murder suspects and victims are black. According to CNN, hundreds of slaves are sold every year just in Libya alone. The hypocrisy of BLM is staggering. For some, it will simply be ignorance. For others, the race grifters, well, they're being deliberately disingenuous. In either case, they demonstrate why we should not try to dismantle or tear down the past. For who's to say that the next generation will not take issue with today's heroes and statues? For example, there are two statues of George Floyd in the US, one in New York and one in New Jersey. Would it be right if another mob descended upon those statues in a few years and toppled them? After all...
Here's what I'll say about this. One thing I have noticed about the organization that he's referring to is that sometimes I do see them being deliberately disingenuous. And what do I mean by that? Let's talk about the black community within the United States. There are a lot of issues the black community within the United States has, just as we are lowest in amount of degrees we achieve. We're the lowest in our economic standing. We're the lowest in marital rates. We're the lowest for fathers within the household. We're the lowest on, I'm not going to say every metric for success, but a lot of metrics for success. We have high crime rates within our communities. And this is not me making anything up. This is just what life is like. However, you look at an organization such as, BLM, and you would think that these issues would be at the top of their poll. Like, yeah, we're going to fight these issues. We're going to help. But I've noticed that they're ignored. It's like they know. I don't know if they know it exists. It's like they try to gaslight you into thinking that, fighting racism is the biggest fight. And I'm not saying racism does not exist. I hope no one's getting that from what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you are called Black Lives Matter, it should be evident that you are fighting black issues, whether they're in America, whether they're in the UK, whether they're in Africa, whether they're anywhere. That should be your number one goal, to help a black community somewhere. But it seems like that is not happening and you are ignoring it. But I may be wrong. Let's continue.
If we are going to make moral judgments on a person's character and actions, is it not grossly offensive that New York and New Jersey have erected statues to Floyd, a violent criminal who served long prison sentences and who broke into a pregnant woman's home
What?
and put a gun to her belly?
He did what? He did what? Oh my gosh. Did he really do that? Nah, he gotta make that up. Oh, I want to look it up, but I don't want to stop the video. Oh, I don't. What? That's just cartoonishly evil. If you actually did that, all jokes aside, that's cartoonishly evil. That sounds like something out of a Dark Knight Gotham comic book. I don't know.
Anyway, that's enough from me. Here's the debate.
Time now for our big debate this morning. Bristol Museum has revealed plans to become the permanent home for the Edward Colston statue. You'll remember that one. Toppled and pushed into Bristol Harbour during the UK's Black Lives Matter protests. A vote will take place today to decide whether the statue of the 17th century slave trader will go on display in Bristol's M Shed Museum permanently. Let's get more, should we? Iman Aiton from Black Lives Matter and Rafe Heidel Manku. Thank you both for joining us on the programme. Away you go.
Now being put into a museum. It's a very good thing. Why? Because it's a British
All right. Well,
artifact,
let me come in.
artifact
All right.
for British museums. British.
Look,
just like
I'm not
British
here
British
to
people.
I'm
This
not
is a
here
good
I'm
thing,
not here to defend
basically.
Colston, right?
Okay.
I mean, the BLM agitators have tarnished and traduced the reputations of many great figures, from Churchill to Nelson to
No,
David
we
Hume.
add
And
violence.
One
We add
second,
violence.
please let me have my
Add
chance,
violence.
my dear. And I'll always defend those characters. But Colston has got a very dark record when it comes to slavery, and so no one will defend that, even though, of course, he does have also a philanthropic side. People are complicated. History is complicated. My issue is with the toppling of the statue and the way in which it was toppled, with the frenzied, baying mob attacking it in scenes reminiscent of the villagers going after Frankenstein with pitchforks and flaming torches, or even, like the Taliban and ISIS attacking monuments and sculptures that they found offensive. And of course, there's a good deal of comparison there because, of course, like the Taliban, BLM and others want to try to erase our history, ban our books, decolonize our curriculums, police our speech. These are sort of year zero cultures which are very damaging to British identity and the sense of nationhood in this country. And all of this happened without public consent. We know from polling that only 13% of the public agreed with the manner in which this statue was toppled, even though 40% agreed with the statue being taken away. And of course, you also have to ask, what is the connection here? I would like to see the statue actually re-erected where it was, with all of the graffiti staying on it, all the vandalism there, to stand as a monument to a moment of national hysteria when the nation was gripped by a mass psychosis because of the death of somebody in another continent. George Floyd had nothing to do with the British story. His death had no relevance.
Yeah, now that I think about it, how did that story even transition to Britain? Didn't that happen in like Minneapolis or something? I don't know the exact place. I don't know, but how did it jump overseas? And anyways, all jokes aside, when it comes to something like this, like vandalism, my thing is this: BLM is supposed to, from what I understand of it, represent some sort of fairness and equity for the black community, whether it's in America, wherever it is. But if you are going to do that, you have to move in such a way where your results and your actions demand equality or equity. Meaning, if you want something gone, you can't break the law and vandalize it. Go through the legal process. Whatever state or country you're in, go through their legal process to get it done. And if you don't agree with that, that's what some of the biggest black influences did. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. That's what he did. Although some people don't want to admit it, Barack Obama. That you have to go through legal processes. And I'm just naming black people who are big influences. I don't know too many. Thurgood Marshall, there's a lot. But anyways, that's what you have to do. Because that shows that you are on the same playing field as the people that you claim oppress you. But anyways, let's continue.
Over here, but because of American culture and BLM agitators, the grievances of America were brought over here when we don't have anything like the race issues that America has. And it was a shameful moment in our history, and I think that's why the statue should go back to where it was.
Well, I do apologise for interrupting earlier. We do tend to get impassioned with these typical debates, Rafe. But I did want to say that 80% of Bristol wanted that statue removed. And like I said, I do have to reiterate the point. For over 100 years, it's been spoken about and criticised. So over 100 years, this has been an issue and they have been ignored. So that's really crucial in understanding the context. So I understand and I appreciate the fact that you've spoken about balance and the fact that he is a good and bad person. We agree on that point, which is always a nice thing to be able to do during a debate.
Do you agree he was a good guy as well?
Of course, balance, right? And this is what I wanted to kind of lead on to in terms of the BLM movement and all of these different EDI initiatives. It's about injecting balance into the conversation, injecting that balance that has been ignored. So that's really important. And then we also have to touch on the fact that the Colston 4 were obviously let off. They weren't charged. And so that's another salient point that we have to introduce. When we talk about damage and the fact that you saw these kind of this mob attacking this statue, well, let's be fair in terms of damage, several things. One was the fact that a really good argument was used. Apparently an art dealer valued the statue at 6,000 originally, and then after it was toppled, it went from 6,000 to 150,000 to potentially 300,000. This argument, can I just finish?
Well,
Let me finish, please.
Okay, I'm gonna let her finish. I'm just confused on where she's going with this, if I'm being honest.
Thank you. And this argument was actually used in court, and it worked. So
But that's not
a
an
really
argument. We're talking about history.
Hold on,
You
no,
can't
but
put a
no,
price
that was
on
actually
history.
validated. That was actually validated. So it's. But
Well,
can I
who
finish,
validated
please?
it?
Can I finish, please? Secondly, so that was validated. That's a salient point. And
What?
then in terms of just kind of understanding that we're not actually trying to eradicate history. I've already mentioned balance, but I really think it's important that if people are so concerned about a statue of a slave trader who advocated for the torture, rape and murder of black people,
we haven't got
and
much
that's,
time.
can I
Please let me-
finish?
please
Can I
let me
finish,
cut in
please?
there.
If that is at the heart of British culture, identity and the essence of being British, then one, that explains why we are still contending with racism 400 years later. That makes so much sense.
Why is she gaslighting him? Why is she gaslighting? Why are you gaslighting? Why are you gaslighting? If you disagree with the statue, I don't even think that's the real discussion. Whether you disagree with the statue or agree with it, that's different. You cannot... Trying to defend illegal activities always bewilders me, because if you trust your nation to be fair and just, meaning you're a citizen there, you're employed there, you live there, you're going to raise a family there, that implies that you believe in your nation's laws and rulings. However, in the same breath, you're sitting here saying that, yeah, break the law. Go ahead and break it. It's not about whether or not you support the statue or agree with it or agree with the person it is. It's the fact that you're trying to defend people tearing it down publicly, vandalizing it. You're doing everything to defend this. Just say what they did was wrong. It's wrong. There's nothing wrong with saying that, yeah, I don't agree with the statue, but, them tearing it down was wrong. And it was illegal, and there's better ways to adjust it. There's better ways to go about it. You could say that, but you refuse to say it.
Now, and of course, I do personally implore the British public to find somewhere else to get their self-esteem, with all due respect, as we now live in an inclusive environment. I'll leave it at that.
The public square is for everybody, and BLM do not have the right to take down statues without public consent. There was no vote for it. There was no decision about any of this, and that's what's the thing here. And if you expunge all of the bad elements from the public square, there'll be no reminders, for example, of slavery. People need to have in their daily lives a reminder of the good and the bad of society, and nothing in this world is binary either. And you talk about balance. Balance is actually very important. Why on earth would BLM suddenly attack the statue of a 17th century slave trader? If you're genuinely concerned about black lives, you'll be protesting the fact that 7 in every 1,000 Africans today is living in slavery. 10 million people. So where were the protests? Where were the protests outside the Nigerian High Commission? Where were the protests outside the embassies of Sudan and Chad? Exactly. Let me finish, please, and go on.
Because they don't care. Let's be honest here. We're 14 minutes into the video. It's only a few people who stayed this long. The reason why there's no protest there is because people don't care. They don't care. They are virtue signaling. They don't actually care about what's going on. She doesn't care what's going on. Look at her face. She didn't care. She's like, wow, you got me there. Yeah. It doesn't cross her mind. Not caring is actually an understatement. The fact that it's slaves in other countries who are black, it doesn't even cross their mind. That's how little they care. It doesn't exist in their reality.
And also, it's also the hypocrisy here, because the same people who are calling for Colston's statue to be toppled are the same ones celebrating and revering the Benin bronzes, for example. The Benin bronzes were commissioned by and commemorate African slave owners, the most brutal slave owners in the world, and yet somehow those are to be celebrated, whereas Colston has to be demolished. And we had that film, The Woman King, out recently, another film celebrated by BLM, yet that celebrates the warriors of the Dahomey Kingdom, the most brutal slave-owning state in the world history, which not only
Wow, that movie was pretty interesting, man. I didn't know it was about that. Wow.
Captured and enslaved fellow Africans to sell to Europeans, but held even more slaves to serve themselves on their own plantations in Africa, and then had brutal human sacrifices of tens of thousands of people. Every year the sacrifice would go on. And somehow this is all forgotten about. And it's only Britain that has to somehow apologise for slavery. And that, I think, shows the lack of balance here.
We're almost out of time. 30 seconds each, please, to make your final point.
Thank you. So just in terms of where we are now, one, you spoke about America and England, the differences, overt racism versus covert. That needs to be thrown out there. Secondly, there is hypocrisy on both sides, both on the left and both on the right. And this is what we need to always talk about when talking about balance. We have to be fair. So I will agree on that point. There is hypocrisy on the left and on the right. And then in terms of why we do these things, we always have to remember that, of course, the statue is important for people like you, and this is why we've offered that opportunity for it to be in a museum.
30 seconds from you.
Well, firstly, this is the nicest debate we've had. This has been the most civil of many that we've had. All I would say is I think people need to have perspective and look at the broader picture. Britain is one of the world's 5 least racist countries. Real racism is alive and well in India, China, Africa. We should be, and America. We should be very proud to live in this country, which is far more tolerant even than...
That's not overt. That's not overt. But anyways, if you have any suggestions for me, comment them down below. LFR Jojo, and I'll see you next time.